Set 11 is available on PBE and I'm extremely hyped to play this set because there's a lot of stuff I really want to try and I feel like there's a lot of possibility to have fun in this game while trying to innovate some combs or trying to min-max some other combs. In this video, I just wanted to share with you 5 different combs that I feel like they are extremely fun to play and most importantly, they are also easy to start the game with and start to learn the set. So I'm going to start this video with 3 combs that are extremely easy to play, especially for beginners, but I will also end this video with 2 other combs that are more for veterans who already know how to transition and really take a huge pleasure in building a late game Exodia comp from whatever they hit first. So let's get started. So at the moment I'm recording this video, I'm using tactic.tools, but when you rewatch this video, you will find the cheat sheet version on tactor.com that is also the sponsor of this channel. And in case you didn't know, I make a lot of guides on tactor.com and you can find all of them to help you climb in the ladder later when it will be out with the set 11. So let's start with the first comp. If you saw the teaser from Riot, you probably seen the beautiful Irelia animation. And who doesn't really want to try her out? She's really extremely fun to play with and she's especially satisfying when she casts her animation that launches a lot of blades in many directions. It's just beautiful and satisfying. So the way you want to play Irelia is with 2 different versions and I'm going to show you this version, which is in my opinion the easiest way to play her, because when you play her you have multiple ways to build carries next to her. When you have 5 Storyweaver, you have the choices between 2 battle effects. One is simply giving her some kind of Ginzu, meaning that whenever she attacks she gains 7% attack speed, something like this. And the other effect is that her spell is actually dealing more damage in a bigger AoE. So I personally really like the stacking Ginzu kinda because she's going to be dealing a lot of damage because she deals damage on hit with her passive, simply exactly the same as the Kale from set 10. And finally, when you have 7 Storyweaver, you have another battle upgrade for Kale, and one of them is basically dealing an AoE damage on her passive, exactly like the Kale from set 10. And the other effect that you can choose is to have a revive of one of your best units every 8 seconds. But don't forget that you cannot revive the same unit, so you cannot just revive again and again your Galio, which is your strongest tank. That would be too broken if that was the case. Honestly, if you manage to have an emblem, you can literally snowball very hard with this comp because right now I think it's a little bit too broken. We don't really care, right? We just want to have fun. We want to try stuff. And you can push your levels like very, very easily until you reach level 9. And at this moment, you really want to play Irelia and you really want to add Xayah because Xayah will benefit from Severe as a trick shot, so she will get the trick shot effect, but also you want to have Irelia because she's Storyweaver, and since she's also duelist, you can have Lee Sin here, that's Dragon Lord and duelist, that shares Dragon Lord with Xayah, and you can add Diana as well because she also gives the Sage effect. And with this comp you have a very, very good late game comp. If you don't really know about the effect of Dragon Lord, it's something like we saw Tempest, I think, in set 7 with the dragons, or kind of similar to Freljord in set 9. Basically, after 8 seconds of combat, you'll deal damage on everyone and your whole board get more attack speed. So that's a really, really nice synergy you can splash in many late game comps because it includes many late game units actually. So now, if you really like to play reroll comps, I have 2 easy reroll comps that you want to play, or at least try, at least once, and see it for yourself if you like it or not. Let's start with Heavenly. So Heavenly is a very specific trait. As you can see here, it has many ways to upgrade, and from 2 units to 7 units. And whenever you have one more Heavenly, you have more bonuses. But how are these bonuses working? It's a little bit tricky at first, but you will see it's very easy to understand. Depending on the Heavenly unit you have on the board, they will grant different bonuses. So if you have, for instance, a Kha'Zix on the board, everyone on your team will get critical chance strike. If you have a Kiana on the board, everyone will get AD, and if you have an emblem that you can craft, then everyone will get Omnivamp. But the thing is, the stats you can see here are the base stats, and you have 2 ways to improve these stats. First of all, the more Heavenly units you have, the more bonuses you have here, up to 220%. But you have also another way to do it, is to have 2 stars and 3 stars. As you can see here, if I have, for instance, a 2-star Kha'Zix, instead of having only 10% critical strike chance to everyone, I can have 15 because it's improved by 50%. And if you have Kha'Zix 3, then you can have 19% instead of 10%. And obviously, this is also multiplied by the amount of heavenly you have. So let's say you have 220% bonus on the Kha'Zix 3. That makes it almost like you have 40% crit chance for everyone. And that's where the strength of this comp is. So this is why if you play this comp, you really want to play it with prismatic ticket or something that makes you roll quite a lot. That way you can have Malphite 3, you can have Kha'Zix 3, you can have Nico 3, you can have Kiana 3. Just with this alone, it will give you tons of critical chance, it will give you tons of resistances, tons of health, and tons of AD, and that's perfect. That's exactly what you need. And then after you can have, since you play all of them, you can have a bit more AP, you can have a bit more attack speed, and Omnivamp if you manage to craft the emblem, which I remind you, it's kind of easy to craft because it requires a spatula that's not that rare anymore, especially with the encounters and the maps and the portals. And also you can have a cloak, which is not necessarily an item that is very difficult to save, let's say. Then when you play this comp, you have obviously Kha'Zix as your main carry. He's a Reaper, so you want to activate this, and the way to activate this is to have Kayn, because he will go very well with Morgana, because they give Ghostly. Ghostly is not the main synergy of this comp, but that can give you an extra damage amplification on the targets you're targeting. And also because Morgana is an excellent unit for Morello. She's going to be one of the best units you want to splash in many comps, simply because she seems so reliable. On the other hand, since you want to have Wukong in the very late game, Wukong is Sage and Morgana is also Sage. So Sage allows you to have more Omnivamp for all the units in the front line and more AP to all the units in the back line. Similarly to Strategist in set 9, but instead of giving shield, is giving Omnivamp to the front line. And it's perfect because you have many frontline carries. You have Kha'Zix, you have Wukong, you have Kayn. And honestly, don't underestimate Kiana 3 and Malphite 3 because they can deal quite a good amount of damage, and having a little bit of Omnivamp is kinda nice. So honestly guys, don't hesitate to go for this comp, especially if you can reroll quite a lot thanks to Nongman, thanks to Portal or stuff like that, because actually it's really easy to play and it can help you learn a lot of stuff about this new set. Now let's go to the third comp that is also a reroll comp, but this one is particularly interesting for people who like to stack a lot for the whole game. And at the end of the game, if you manage to stack stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, you can have tanks with like 5,000 health with no problem. So let's talk about Dryad reroll. So Dryad is another comp that you can play and you can actually reach a high amount of units thanks to an emblem that you can craft with a spatula and a belt. So Dryad is a little bit similar to Punk in a way of stacking, but you don't stack the same way. I'm going to explain a little bit. So when you play TFT, you have two ways of stacking. Either it's a unit that stacks, but it means that if it's tied to the unit and you sell the unit, you lose all the stacks, or you have the trait as a whole that stacks. And Punk is a trait that stacks as a whole because you can sell the Punk, you can put them back, you will not lose the stacks. Here with Dryad is very similar. You can stack as much as you want with Dryad, but if you remove the units, change the unit and all of that, they will keep all the stacks, and that's why this comp is really interesting to play from stage 2, similarly to Punk. The difference here, of course, is the way you stack and the stat that you stack. So if you play Dryad, you will get a bit of health on everyone, you get a bit of AP, but what's really important in this comp is that whenever you kill a target and PvE counts, so the minions in the PvE count for stacking it, you will stack definitive health on all the Dryad. And this doesn't disappear. So you can remove Gnar and pull it back later, you will get all the stacks. So that's the really important part of the comp. And if you hit 6 Dryad, so here again it's the same bug. I have a 6 Dryad with the emblem, but here it doesn't show. If you have 6 Dryad, then you stack 12 health. For now, it might be balanced later, but for now you stack 12 health per target you killed. PvE counts, so you can stack quite a lot. I tried one of my game and I had like, I think 1.2k stacked, even though I kind of low rolled a little bit my Gnar and everything. And the way you want to play this comp is to reroll around 2 carries, which are 2 costs. It's Gnar and Kindred. So if you play set 4, you'll be nostalgic a little bit of this Kindred and you will love playing her. And Gnar is a little bit different from the Gnar of set 10. This is a Gnar that doesn't transform, it doesn't change its shape, but it has two things that's interesting. First of all, he has a passive and he can stack a lot of AD each fight thanks to his passive. And the second is like his damage ability where he just throws a boulder and that deals damage to whoever hits the boulder. So the way you want to play Gnar, you really want to have a Titan because as you can see, the more AP he has, the more AD he can stack, and Titan gives a lot of AP and AD and resistances. So it just makes this item being the best item for Gnar, especially that you want to put him in the front line because you want him to take damage so he can stack faster. That's just like perfect. I wouldn't be surprised if the best items for him is 2 Titans plus a BT because he still needs to sustain, right? But if you cannot make double Titan, you can have something like Sterak. I do expect Gargantuan to be overly broken for this comp, but we will have to try. It's not something that we can try just because we want to. We are depending on a Nogmat. Then for Kindred, she has a very low mana, so having blue buff allows her to cast again and again and again. She deals AP damage, so that's why you want to build differently. You want to have Rabadon so she can have a lot of AP and a lot of damage amp. And Guardbreaker is actually really nice because she's a Reaper, so with Yone being the other Reaper, she's going to be able to crit naturally. That's the effect of Reaper, and she will get also 20% critical strike chance from the effect. So that way, Guardbreaker, you can have even more damage amplification, and she can literally melt through targets and be difficult to deal with. On the other hand, after Reaper and Dryad, her other synergy you want to activate is Fated. So for Fated, you have Set, you have Kindred, and you have Syndra. Syndra is interesting because she brings Arcanis with Azir, so that gives AP to the whole team. So Kindred will be happy about it, for instance, Gnar as well. And then finally, Set is probably the best unit you can have because in case you didn't know, Set has a passive. And the passive is simple. At the start of each round, you put 2 units next to him, and depending on the amount of health these units have, Set will get more or less AD. And this is definitive stacking. So meaning that you can stack the whole game, but of course here is different. If you sell the set, you will lose the stacks. However, since you play Dryad and you have Bruiser and you have a shit ton of health on literally all the Dryad, so Gnar can have like 4k health, Kubuko can have like even more health because he can stack health as well thanks to his passive. You can literally have Set with like 100% AD in a couple rounds because he gets so many stacks of units with tons of health next to him. This is, my friend, the comp that you will love to play if you really like to stack things every round and keep them forever until you achieve the very late game phase where you have everyone with thousands of health, you have a set with hundreds of AD, and that's it. You just have too much stats and you can't lose from that. So I know some of you are also veterans of TFT, and I know some of you really like to play comps that requires a bit more logical decisions, trickier transitions, and a lot of planning to make sure you can build the Exodia comp with the 5 cost and 4 cost units. So for you, I have 2 other comps that you really want to try, and I think these comps are really cool to try even if you are still new in TFT because they will help you learn a lot of stuff from this set. So let's go with first comp around AD. So let's say you really like to play flex and you have a strong AD start and you have strong AD carries in the early game and mid game, and you are wondering what kind of comp you can land in the very late game to make sure you have one of the best comp possible to win the game. So in that case, I have Trickshot for you. And this comp is not the only comp you can play with AD, but it's one of the best AD late game comp. If you remove Irelia, but we already talked about it, so I wanted to show you something a bit different. So the way you want to play Kai'Sa is by activating 2 of her synergies, Ink Shadow and Trickshot. So I'm going to start talking about Trickshot. Trickshot is kind of similar to Sharpshooter if you play in set 4. It's simply like when they cast, they have some kind of ricochet and you deal more damage, but to another target, and that's pretty much it. Right? It's really easy to understand. Then you have Ink Shadow. This one is a little bit trickier, but it's kind of similar to Shimmer Scale for those who play in set 7, I think. It's set 7, right? Because it will create you unique items that you can put on everyone, and these items are actually quite powerful. So I'm going to show you a couple of ones just here. So you have offensive and defensive tattoos. These are the items from Ink Shadow. For instance, the one I put on Kai'Sa in the builder just now is the Tattoo of Bombardment. It gives 40% AD, 20% attack speed, and every third attack, it attacks the lowest health in the team and with the chance to basically finish them. So that's really powerful. You have something like Tattoo of Force, which is more like a defensive one. Then you have a Tattoo of Fury, which is something that gives a lot of attack speed and a lot more damage to units who are low health. Then you have Tattoo of Protection, which is also tankiness tattoo. You have Tattoo of Toxin. Here is more like offensive / utility because it allows you to deal more damage over time, but also to wound the enemy, so basically reducing the heal they can get. And finally, you have another one, Tattoo of Vitality, which is also another tank tattoo. So there's one thing I really like about Kai'Sa. In case you don't know, her spell allows her to fire 20 waves of shots, which can ricochet thanks to Trickshot, so that deals quite a lot of damage. It's really cool to see, actually the animation is cool. But there's one thing I actually saw is that this ability triggers the Runan so many times. I don't know how many times exactly, probably not 20 because it's broken, maybe like between 5 and 10, something like this. And so this is why I believe that the Runan is probably one of her best items if you want to maximize her DPS, which is really nice to see because we didn't see that in set 10. We didn't see many units actually using the Runan properly, except Lucian. But now for sure we have many units who can use it properly, and Kai'Sa is one of them. And I believe like Kai'Sa is going to be a true monster if you manage to build her Runan with Death Blade so she can have more AD and with offensive tattoo. I also prefer to build Kai'Sa first as main carry and Xayah more like as utility, because one of the main issues with Xayah is that she is sharing the same pool as Rakan, because technically speaking Xayah and Rakan are the same units, so they share the same pool. But since it's a 5 cost and many people want to play her or play Rakan, it's going to be quite hard to find Xayah 2 in many games. So that's why I prefer to build Xayah more like utility with the shred, with red buff. And if you manage to have Xayah 2 plus another offensive component, you can play Infinity Edge, so you can have 2 very late game carries. Then if you want to play around those 2 units as your carries, you need to build a team around it. So obviously I talked already about Ink Shadow. The best Ink Shadow units you want to have is Udyr for the late game. You also want to have Volibear because it can give duelists with Lee Sin, and Lee Sin is a nice unit you want to add because it has Dragon Lord that gives attack speed to the whole team and deals damage to the whole team, especially if you have Xayah. And then after you want to build useful units next to them, you can have Morgana. I told you already, Morgana is such a good unit you want to put everywhere. Here you might say I have Morello and Red Buff. Obviously you don't build those 2 at the same time, you just build like whatever you have, right? If you already have Morello and Morgana, just don't build a Red Buff on Xayah and vice versa, right? It's just like I wanted to show this. But if it's confusing, tell me in the comment and I will remove it, because I might understand that some of you might be confused seeing this together. And then also you want to build a Ghostly that allows you to have a bit more damage. Ghostly is a bit difficult and tricky to understand, but basically like whenever Ghostly units deals damage or take damage 7 times, they will send ghosts or specters, okay? And the units who have specters on them will take more damage. And those specters can go from one unit to another unit if the unit dies. So think of it as something like Contagion, the augment, but it's something you can stack a lot during the fight. And so you can end fights with like units with like 10 ghosts, 10 specters, and taking so much more damage just because they have 10 specters. So this is really a good synergy to splash in, especially with Morgana, who can easily proc the specters. And finally, the main unit we didn't talk yet is Udyr. So Udyr is a very tricky one. It has a tank. He is a tank, but he can be a DPS as well. So he's kind of a bruiser, but AP bruiser, because as you can see, he's dealing magic damage. One good thing I like about Udyr is like he has a Radiant Edge of Night integrated in his kit. So you don't need to build something like Edge of Night because it's useless. And whenever he goes below 50% of his health, that's the Spirit Walker effect, he will lose the aggro, so no one will attack him anymore. He will get back to full health and he will change his ability from the Ram Slam, which is more like a tank effect, to Tiger Strikes, which is more like actually a DPS ability. And so this is why Udyr is a bit tricky to play. I think it's going to be like Yorick in set 10. If you put only tank item, it's going to be great. If you put bruiser item, but more like AP bruiser item, and you have a good comp around it, he can be legendary. And this is why I like to put stuff like Titan, Crown Guard, and BT. That way he has a lot of AP, he has a lot of resistances, he has sustain, so he he can literally like be a real monster and help Xayah and Kai'Sa to finish fights. And now let's talk about the last comp, which is another late game comp with a lot of 4-cost and 5-cost units that you want to play, especially if you have AP items. Okay, so now if you have a lot of AP items and you still want to play Strongbolt from stage 2 to stage 4, you want to rush your level 8, you want to rush your level 9, and you want to play late game units. What are some of the possibilities you can play? And actually you have quite a lot. So in this video I'm showing only one, but you can play a lot of different ways. It's very flexible and it's mainly depending on what you hit first. So the way you want to play is to play around 4 invokers, because invokers have a lot of late game units which are quite useful. So you have Lilia, one of your carry, you have Annie, your main tank, and you have Alune, the new unit, or Alune. Tell me exactly how do we pronounce it, because I won't say Alune, but it feels a bit weird, no? Alune? I don't know. But anyway, who is an excellent support unit who doesn't need to have item to actually have impact on the game. And then after, finally, you need another one. So we put Janna because she's a Dragon Lord, and we just love Dragon Lord. It's a synergy you can put in many late game comps. So Invoker is really similar to the Invoker from Set 9. It's just like if you have only 2 Invokers, you give a bit of mana to everyone. But at 4 Invokers, your Invokers get a lot more mana every 3 seconds, and you want to play around that. So this is why you want to play Lilia, because Lilia also has rotating spell, meaning that every 3 times she casts, her spell will be enhanced and deal much more damage. So this is why it's really important for her to have a lot of mana thanks to Invoker, but also thanks to blue buff that will allow her to have only 40 mana max, and she can cast many times thanks to that. Then you have Hui. Hui is a mystic artist. Then your main invoker that you really want to play is Annie. So Annie is going to be your tank, and she's really interesting because she has a passive we've never seen before. So her passive allows her to heal herself whenever she deals damage to a unit that's burning. So basically, the more fire you have, the happier she is. And her active actually is something that allows her to jump on T-burst, deals a lot of damage, or actually not that much damage, but deals damage and stun a lot of units. And then after, the T-burst also will deal burn damage in the future, so that allows Annie to also heal even more. But speaking of that, this is one of the situations where I feel like it's not bad to have another unit who can actually deal burn damage. So that's why I like to put Morello on Rakan, who can deal a good amount of damage and help Annie burn more targets and heal more thanks to her passive. Then the third invoker that you really like to have is Alune. So Alune is a new character, is the sister of Aphelios, and she is more like a support unit in this sense, because she has 2 ways to help your team. First of all, whenever she hits enemies with her ability, she will remove 20% of their magic resistance. Thanks to that, you are less dependent on finding a static or ionic spark, even though it's not that bad to have one, because ionic spark or static has a better shred than Alune, and it's more consistent. Then the second thing that's really important is like all the units in the same row as her, when she casts her ability, will gain a lot of attack speed. So Lilia, Hui, and Janna, even though Janna is not that important, and Alune herself will have apparently 40% attack speed, which is split among the allies. So actually, if it's split, I'm thinking of maybe we should put Janna here, so she doesn't get that attack speed, and it's better to have only on Alune, Hui, and Lilia. And now, speaking of Hui, it's the late game AP carry you want to build at the end, alongside Lissandra. So actually, Lissandra maybe is the one you want to stuff first, because she can give you more items thanks to her ability to farm a lot of items. But let's say we have Hui. One thing I really like about this comp compared to the one I just showed earlier is like Hui has artist ability, which allows you to copy units. So basically, if you have a pair of 5-cost units, you put one on the bench, and after a couple of turns, you will get a 2-star 5-cost units for free. And this is why this comp, in my opinion, will probably be easier to play, simply because you have one unit that can copy units, and so it's easier to have 2-star units. That's pretty much it. So since you want to play Wei and you have Lilia, who are both mythic, you really want to have another mythic unit, and it's going to be Nautilus, a late game tank. That way Annie is not the solo tank and she will last longer in the fights. I think it's a really cool thing to add because it gives a lot of health, it gives a lot of AP and attack speed to the mythic units. And after 4 fights, these bonuses are increased by 50%. So this is why you really like to have this, because it's like free stats basically. And that's it for this video. I think those 5 comps are actually really fun to play, especially if you want to start the new set on PBE. Obviously there are many other comps and I'm really curious to know exactly what kind of comps you already tried or you are looking forward to try, because like I want to try all of them, to be honest. And one thing I want to tell as well, like I said already at the beginning of this video, I will make a cheat sheet version of this video on tactor.com. The link will be in the description. That way you can simply click and check them while you're playing on PBE. Until next video, see you on PBE.